As the group struggled to lead the horde of zombies away from their home, an unexpected event occurred. A loud horn blast echoed throughout the community, catching everyone off guard. Their plans were disrupted, and nearly half of the zombies redirected their attention towards the community. The cause of this unexpected turn was a group of marauders who had invaded the community, armed with cold weapons. They attacked anyone they encountered and even attempted to ram through the community's fences with a truck. Thankfully, Spencer noticed the intrusion and quickly shot and killed the driver, slowing down the truck. However, the body inside the truck squashed the horn, causing it to blare loudly, further disrupting Rick and the others' plans. Spencer hurried to the first floor to shut off the horn but found the wooden door blocked by debris. It took him a few minutes to free himself and open the car door ready to turn off the horn. However, by then, the driver had turned into a zombie, creating a tense situation. Spencer cautiously approached with a dagger but hesitated to strike. Fortunately, Morgan arrived just in time to kill the zombie with his stick, allowing them to shut off the horn. Spencer quickly briefed Morgan on the community and Morgan immediately called on Spencer to assist him. However, Spencer, being timid, chose not to follow. When Morgan rushed inside, he saw a long-haired man wielding an axe dismembering one of the residents. The man observed Morgan's approach and suddenly charged at him, but quickly stopped in his tracks. Morgan's lack of immediate flight piqued his curiosity and made him wary. However, he continued to taunt Morgan, questioning how he wanted to die. Morgan expressed his reluctance to kill but urged the man to leave. The man would not listen to him and was about to strike, but was stabbed in the back by one of the men lurking nearby. The attacker was none other than Carol, who had donned the attire of the intruders. Morgan questioned why she killed the man, insisting he could have stopped him. Carol, aware of Morgan's mindset, couldn't be bothered to explain. Instead, she swiftly marked a W on her forehead and informed Morgan that these people had no guns. They needed to go to the armory immediately, or else everyone in the community would die if they were found. Morgan, once again resorting to moral persuasion, claimed that Carol didn't need to kill. Seeing Carol's indifference, he attempted to awaken her conscience with reasoned arguments. However, Carol had no interest in listening to Morgan's pointless words. She told him that if he wanted to help, he should follow her. At this moment, Maggie and Deanna also arrived at the edge of the fence. Spencer called out to his mother, relieved to see that her son was safe. Maggie suggested they go inside and help, but Deanna stated that she couldn't go in and would only be a burden. She felt better staying outside. Maggie didn't insist any further and just urged Spencer to take care of his mother. In the end, this mother-son pair stayed outside. Rick had a saying that hit the mark. The community was really fortunate. Their biggest stroke of luck was the arrival of Rick's team. Without them, the people in the community would have been wiped out long ago. Rosita and Aaron successfully rescued a resident and took her to the infirmary for treatment. The people in the infirmary were also perplexed by the situation outside. Denise, being an intern doctor, had no choice but to step up to the plate at this moment. Among the original community members, only Aaron had the courage and combat skills. He stated that they needed to go out and provide support, and Rosita naturally followed suit. Even Tara, who had just recovered from her serious injuries, wanted to go outside. However, Eugene, the big man that he was, didn't dare to go and found excuses to stay in the infirmary. After they left, Denise, being an intern doctor, was scared and hesitant to directly treat the injuries. She was afraid of making mistakes. Tara could only offer encouragement and told her that there was no turning back now. If she didn't try, the patient would die. After listening, Denise felt nervous but gathered herself and began to prepare. Jesse's son, Ron, saw the chaos in the community and tried to hide wherever he could. However, he was discovered by a man. If caught, it would likely mean his death. A gunshot struck the man's thigh, causing him to fall to the ground in agonizing pain. Carl was the one who saved Ron. Ron breathed a sigh of relief. Faced with Carl's approach, the man pleaded for mercy with a pitiful and aggrieved expression, as if he were the victim. However, people can be cunning, and it was just a ploy. In the struggle, Carl decisively shot and killed him. Then he let Ron into the house, assuring him that he could protect him. But Ron, looking at the doorway, saw Enid with Carl, and his jealousy surged. Shaking his head, he was about to go back home. At least he needed to appear strong in front of his love rival. Meanwhile, at Ron's house, Jessie took Sam and hid inside the closet because there were intruders in her home. Just outside the closet, they dared not make a sound. Unfortunately, Ron returned at that moment, followed by sounds of someone coming downstairs. Jessie quickly opened the closet and encouraged Sam to be brave, telling him to stay quiet inside. she walked quietly down the stairs, not seeing the intruder for the moment. Her handgun was given to her by Rick for self-defense. When she heard the sound of the door opening, she disregarded her own exposure and shouted. However, she was spotted by the intruder as well. They immediately engaged in a struggle, and the handgun fell to the ground. The woman forcefully pushed Jessie onto the cabinet, knocking her unconscious. The woman turned to pick up the handgun, but Jessie opened her eyes. She had pretended to be unconscious. Slowly, she stood up, picked up the scissors from the table, and as the woman bent down to retrieve the gun, Jessie gathered her courage and lunged forward, stabbing her. With each stab, Jessie became more and more insane. If she didn't kill this woman, both of her sons would die. She lost count of how many times she stabbed her. Ron entered the room, but Jessie didn't notice. Witnessing the scene before him, Ron found his mother somewhat terrifying. As Rick kills his father and his mother grows closer to Rick, Ron believes it was all orchestrated by Rick. Carol disguised herself and chained Morgan, successfully tricking the intruders on the road. They praised her actions. Carol remained silent, fearing exposure. However, Morgan noticed Gabriel resisting one of the intruders. Carol can be hard-hearted at times. Despite Carol's advice to prioritize their own safety, Morgan broke free of his chains and charged forward with a wooden staff. Carol didn't bother to help, continuing to run towards the armory. Unfortunately, Carol discovered that she was out of ammunition along the way. She had no choice but to flee quickly. Eventually, she reached the armory, where she was tackled to the ground by a woman in hot pursuit. Fortunately, she got her gun and shot another intruder who tried to escape. Seeing the bloodstains outside, Carol assumed the person would not survive. The injured woman on the ground moaned in pain, and Carol, devoid of expression, stabbed her with a knife. At that moment, Carol sensed someone behind the door. Opening it, she found a fellow member guarding the armory. Carol removed her mask, revealing her identity, and the woman breathed a sigh of relief. Carol quickly grabbed a bag and put the handgun inside, then tell the woman to lock the door after she leaves. She taught her how to use the gun and advised her to shoot directly at anyone who approached the door. Meanwhile, Morgan successfully rescued Gabriel, choosing not to kill but rather tying up the intruder with a rope. As the man regained consciousness,
Freeing you. You're trapped.
Their eyes met. These invaders held extreme beliefs. Before he could finish speaking, Carol didn't wait for them to react. She quickly gave each of them a handgun. Morgan felt very uncomfortable. Carol had killed again. Was she a serial killer? Maggie also arrived on the street. Carol didn't say much and handed her a gun as well. The counterattack began. These thieves were still killing and looting. They never expected anyone to stand up to them. Rosita and Aaron also sneaked around the side of a house. They didn't show mercy to these invaders. One man was still immersed in the slaughter, unaware that his days were numbered. Who could imagine that a meek, middle-aged woman would repeatedly become a hero? Morgan walked through the streets without the intention to kill. A familiar man stood in his way, accompanied by 4 others. While remaining vigilant, he said, "Our people are armed. Staying here will only lead to a dead end. They might have already aimed at you. Isn't it better to save your own life? You'll be shot at any moment. Leave now. Never come back. If you continue living like this, you'll die sooner or later." The men were all perplexed, unsure of which side Morgan was taking. However, they realized that Morgan's words made sense, and he could only lead the other 4 individuals away. Before leaving, he picked up a handgun. After it was all over, Carol looked at the lifeless body of the smoking woman on the ground. This made her feel very sad. Although she could hide herself, she had already become close to these housewives. The once thriving community had lost nearly 2/3 of its population in this attack. Most of the women and children were familiar to Carol. She had understood too much a long time ago. Following Rick, this world is not a place where I can avoid trouble by not provoking others to survive. She couldn't afford to be soft-hearted. She was a good homemaker, but when pushed to her limits, she shows no mercy. Aaron walked down the street, now tasked with checking all the bodies to ensure they wouldn't turn into walkers. As he finished with the last one, he planned to take a break. However, he noticed a familiar backpack on the ground. It was the one he had lost when he and Daryl were surrounded by walkers. The backpack was abandoned in the canning factory. Inside was the envelope with the photos. As Aaron flipped through the pictures, his hands trembled. He understood why these people had targeted this place. It must be because of these photos. Understanding the reason filled him with immense guilt. After this incident, Spencer questioned Rosita, asking if these kinds of situations happen often outside. Rosita confirmed that it was the norm. Deanna also realized that she had made a grave mistake. Trying to maintain a civilized society in this post-apocalyptic world seemed ludicrous. Instead, Rick's suggestion to arm everyone and teach them survival skills is ridiculed by her. If they had listened earlier, the attackers who arrived today would have been eliminated before they even reached the walls. Morgan walked along the road, checking for any overlooked bodies. At this moment, he heard some movement inside a house. He cautiously approached and entered. On high alert, he checked each room one by one. Suddenly, a man inside the room launched an attack. Although Morgan dodged a fatal blow, he was caught off guard and received a beating. Several punches were landed consecutively. Only then did Morgan start to fight back. Both of them stood up and faced each other. It turned out they were old acquaintances. Morgan wanted to kill him, but he remembered the Aikido teachings his mentor had passed down to him and suppressed his urge to kill. Instead, he knocked the man unconscious. Rick and the group quickly ran towards the community, with tens of thousands of zombies following closely behind. Rick was filled with urgency, leading the way in a sprint. Daryl was somewhat concerned and planned to ride his motorcycle back to provide support. However, Rick told him to keep moving forward and assured him that they would handle it. Rick emphasized that if their group of zombies turned around, the situation in the community would only worsen. With determination, they continued running. Typically, women tend to stumble at moments like these. The woman accidentally sprained her ankle. Glenn helped her up and urged her to keep going. The last man in the group began to complain, blaming Rick for everything and claiming that they were led here to die. He even accused Rick of killing Carter. Michonne, speechless, knew that having a teammate without a brain could be troublesome. Such unforeseen circumstances were difficult to predict. The man grew increasingly agitated. The more he thinks he will die because of Rick. It was only after Michonne's urging that he reluctantly continued on way. He also looked at Rick with some resentment in his eyes. Meanwhile, Rick gathered Glenn and Michonne to discuss a new plan. Rick explained that he would return to the crossroads in the RV and arrive at the community ahead of the zombies, once again drawing them away. The rest of the group would continue straight back to the community. Rick called Glenn and Michonne to the side for a private conversation. He had some confidential words to share with them. Rick lowered his voice and instructed them, on the way back, anything that gets in your way, whether it be people or zombies, destroy them without hesitation. Although I hope everyone can make it back safely, the truth is not everyone might. Do all can to save them, but if anyone can't keep up, leave them behind and move on. You must be resolute. Ensure your own safety and return to the community. At this point there was a scream from inside the crowd. Heath, who was eavesdropping, was not noticed. The group rushed over immediately. The man who had been complaining earlier was bitten on the neck by a zombie, proving that people like him couldn't survive in the apocalypse. The others came and looked at the dying man on the ground. They were shocked. Never before had they experienced something like this happening to a teammate. Michonne gave him a final ride. Suddenly, the sound of the horn abruptly ceased, which was somewhat of a relief. Rick retrieved the man's gun and knife. Heath looked at them, having overheard their conversation earlier, and he suddenly felt that these people were cold-blooded and heartless. Rick and the rest of the team split up and took action. The others no longer wasted any time. With the horn silenced, they didn't need to run anymore. The horde of zombies behind them was still a considerable distance away. After traveling for a while, they encountered a few zombies ahead. 3 members skillfully engaged in combat, while the other 2 men bravely faced the approaching zombies from the side. It couldn't rely solely on Glenn's group to fight. Only the man with the hat cowardly stayed in the back. The 2 men in the front fought against the zombies, gradually gaining some skills in the process. At the rear, the fool trembled and pulled out his gun. Unfortunately, his gun shot one of his teammates in the calf. What a nuisance! The zombie also jumped on Scott's body. The situation was urgent and Nicholas had no choice but to shoot to deal with the situation. The fool, however, ran without looking back, disappearing without a trace in a matter of seconds. Glenn was dumbfounded by such behavior. 2 zombies lunged at Scott, and the situation became extremely urgent. Fortunately, Bruce dispatched one of them, and Heath rushed over to stab the zombie near Scott's leg. Scott's lower leg was in excruciating pain and he couldn't walk anymore. Just when everyone started to relax, a zombie bit Bruce from behind. It was unexpected for everyone. Bruce turned around and killed the zombie. The group looked at him with a sense of regret. Such circumstances were the most heart-wrenching. The atmosphere instantly turned somber, and no one knew what to say. Bruce understands the implications and accepts this openly. He encouraged everyone not to dwell on sorrow and reminded them that they still had to continue on their journey. He wanted to go back and see his newlywed wife one last time. This makes everyone's heart even sadder. They quickly passed through a forest and arrived at a nearby town. Now, 2 members of the group were unable to walk. They had hoped to find a functioning car, but unfortunately, none of them were drivable. Nicholas had been to the town before with his teammates, so he led the way. As they walked, Nicholas spotted a hat on the ground. It belonged to the man who had escaped earlier. When they reached an alley, they saw several zombies feasting on flesh. That's their runaway teammate. Watching the zombies feast, Nicholas became distracted. This wasn't the first time it had happened in the past few days. Glenn nudged him back to reality. They re-entered the street, only to find that the situation had deteriorated. The swarm of zombies on the road they had come from was closing in. The road ahead is also swarming with zombies. They had no choice but to seek shelter in a pet store. The first thing they did upon entering the store was to check the premises. Heath and Michonne looked around but didn't spot any zombies. The 2 of them began discussing strategies. With the zombies blocking their way outside, it would be a nightmare if they were discovered when the horde arrived. Michonne suggested that if necessary, she and Glenn could lead the zombies away. Heath, sarcastically, commented on how effective that had been lately, a direct reference to Rick using the same tactic to attract zombies. Michonne was puzzled by his remark but assured him that she was actively working on finding a solution and wouldn't give up. Heath then added, "Yeah, just temporarily not giving up." Michonne grew even more perplexed by his behavior. At that moment, Glenn and Nicholas approached and presented an idea. If there was a way to divert the incoming zombie hordes, they wouldn't have gone to the community. Glenn's plan was to burn down a building, creating a lot of noise and commotion. He told Michonne that if he did not return in a short time, she would take everyone back to the community. He reassured her, saying he wouldn't die. If he got trapped, he would find a way to let them know he was still alive. Nicholas stepped forward and offered to join Glenn. He knew there was a feed store on the outskirts of the town that could easily be ignited. Glenn didn't refuse his assistance. Before taking action, he needed to have a conversation with Rick. The probability of not surviving with so many zombies around was too high. Meanwhile, Rick was still running towards the intersection. Unaware of how long he had been running, he didn't dare to stop for a moment, constantly moving forward and killing zombies. Suddenly, his walkie-talkie crackled, and Glenn's voice came through, while continuing to slay the zombies. Rick listened to Glenn's message. Glenn informed him that they were in a nearby town, and the horde of zombies would reach there in about 20 minutes. He planned to set fire to a building in a different direction to attract the zombies. If Rick didn't see the thick smoke, it meant Glenn had failed, and the horde would continue towards the community. In that case, they would have to rely on Rick. Rick finally finished killing the zombies in his vicinity, but his hand was injured by a knife in the process. As he heard Glenn's final words, he fell into contemplation.
I gotta go. Good luck, dumbass.
The word dumbass was their first meeting, the nickname Glenn called him. It seems that Glenn understood that what was to be done was very dangerous. Rick could only pray for his good brother in his heart and quickly collected weapons from the zombies' bodies before continuing towards the intersection. Inside the pet shop Glenn they have set off. Michonne helped Scott dress his wound. The woman's ankle was sprained and she told Heath to leave her alone, stating that she was now a burden to the group. She also mentioned that they would encounter more zombies on the way, and Scott echoed her sentiments, believing that they would all die if continued like this. Heath reassured them, saying they would stick together and take care of each other as they always had. They don't abandon anyone, it's not their style. After saying this, Heath glanced at Michonne, who was once again confused. It seemed like he was implying that she would abandon her teammates. Later, Michonne approached Heath privately and asked if he had any issues with her. Heath told her the truth, revealing that he had overheard Rick's words. Michonne felt relieved, finally understanding the reason behind his strange attitude.